Joe Girardi is out. Who's in? Harp, let's turn to you to start. Who are the leading candidates that Brian Cashman's going to look to?
Well, it's not A-Rod.
All right, good night, everybody.
It's not Lou Piniella. It's not Jim Whelan. It's not going to be a big name. I know that's probably what Yankee fans want. They're used to. But that's not how this Cashman operates. He wants a guy that the analytics is going to decide he can control. Compatibility is the big word now in baseball. Get a manager you can control. So how about Josh Paul? Does anybody know who he is? Staten Island manager of the Yankees. But he was a major league catcher. Cashman has actually raved about him for years in terms of his communication skills, all that stuff. That's a guy. Another guy is Tim Narin, who's in their front office, who's a guy who played for the Red Sox, has been a VP of baseball operations, a scout. Cashman loves him, said he could be a manager. Those are the type of guys you're looking at. I don't think you're looking at big names.
Peter, who are you hearing?
Oh, I think Naring actually could be a leading contender here for this, just because, as you mentioned, Harp, Cashman is so high on him in terms of his ability to do different jobs within the organization.
Like an A.J. Hinch.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, a guy like Naring could really be an extension of the front office for Cashman and kind of follow the plan that the Yankees and their analytics department has. I think it's interesting. You know, you have a couple of guys, you have a couple of coaches on the staff, whether it's Rob Thompson, Joe Espada. You know, I don't know if those names really excite anybody either. You know, I know a lot of fans, you mentioned some of the bigger names. Like, I'm sure a lot of fans would like to see Don Mattingly come back. I don't think that's happening. They passed Don Mattingly over the first time around in favor of Joe Girardi. Don Mattingly has a job right now. I don't think that's happening, because also, like, if you do hire Don Mattingly, at some point you have to fire Don Mattingly, and that's got to be tough for any Yankee GM to do down the line. So it's interesting to me where they go with this, but I don't think it's, as you mentioned, I don't think it's going to be a big name.
None of these names are doing it for me. I'm sorry. I know I have to evolve, and this is the way the game has gone here. But it's one thing to accept Mickey Callaway, who shows some promise, you know, for the Mets organization, trying to get in a different direction here. But the Yankees, I mean, coming off of the year that they had with all the expectations, one of, if not the best manager in the game leaves, you go from Joe Torre to Joe Girardi to guys I've never heard of before. That's hard to believe.
Well, Pete, you mentioned it before. If George was still around, A-Rod would be.
No question about it.
In the chair.
We got the carving board tomorrow.
If George was still alive, okay, we're not putting fannies in the seats with any of these guys. And here's the other thing we're not talking about. Can they handle the New York media? How much have things changed where the Mets make a hire and now the Yankees will look at some unknown who's never had to deal with this before?
Yeah, but this comes back to what we talked about a little before, that GMs do not think. They think basically managers are interchangeable almost now, and I think in New York that's risky. But let's face it, Girardi was not good with the media. He had to be a good manager, a good solid manager. He never would have lasted 10 years because he was terrible with the media, and not because he was a bad guy. He had no charisma. He had none of the Tory charisma. So I think, but you just never know. I mean, I always bring up the example of Buddy Harrelson, who was a coach with the Mets, beloved coach, great guy. He followed Davey as the manager back in the day, and he couldn't handle the second guessing, the pressure, everything that with it. You never know when that guy moves over how it's going to handle that.
Peter, I want to ask you, what do you think the number one sort of job thing you'd be looking for in the candidate? What's the best thing this manager has to do?
Well, I think the Yankees want him to be a guy who's going to follow their script. That's what it sounds like that they want right now.
So a yes man.
And, a yes man on yes, I guess. I don't know if we can say that on SNY, but here we are. You look at Girardi, he was, I mean, as you mentioned, he was a guy who was nicknamed the Binder, but even he was not analytical enough for the Yankees, for their front office, for what they want right now. So if he's pushing back, they might want a guy who's, a little more compatible, as you say, Harp, in using that word, for what they want going forward.
I just don't get it. Be careful what you wish for. All the Yankee fans who want him out, Brian Cashman, who couldn't do no wrong, this year, obviously, with all the moves that he made, but years ago, Yankee fans wanted him out. Now, all of a sudden, he's making the decisions here. He's got all the power, and he's going to bring in some no-name that nobody's ever heard of that Yankee fans are going to accept and love. I have a hard time believing that.
As I said to Harp earlier this morning, I'm completely confused. Joe Girardi isn't analytical enough, but Brian Cashman wants more of a heartbeat, but not enough when Torre was here. And Tim Naring. I'm confused. I'm so confused.